When you look at any spec sheet online for the brand new Pixel 8a, you're going to see pretty much the same thing with regard to the system on a chip. It's going to say Google Tensor G3, but what these spec sheets tend to be leaving out is the fact that it is not quite the same Tensor G3 that we have on devices like the Pixel 8 Standard or the Pixel 8 Pro. In fact, it has been packaged differently, and the result of this is that that chip should run a little bit warmer, and by virtue of that, it should be a little bit slower, in particular with sustained use. So if you're gaming for long periods of time, for instance, that might be a place where you would see a difference. So in this video, what I'm going to do is try to dig in a little bit more, show you some side-by-sides, do some benchmarking, and see, is the Pixel 8a appreciably slower than my Pixel 8 Pro? I want to start things off by seeing which device actually manages to reboot the fastest. I think that is a sort of an overlooked thing between these two. This is, of course, my Pixel 8a. This is the Pixel 8 Pro. Most people don't reboot their devices too often, but I think that this is an interesting way to kind of immediately try to identify if there is a significant difference between these two. So obviously my Pixel 8 Pro has an unlocked bootloader, and as you saw on the screen there, that kind of offset it by almost a full 10 seconds. So if you take that 10 seconds and you sort of account for that and remove it, the Pixel 8 Pro did reboot a little bit faster than the 8A, not by a huge margin, but that's the result. But now that we have rebooted and nothing is still loaded in RAM, what I want to do is just quickly launch some applications side by side, and we'll see if there is a noticeable difference between these two. Let's start off with Feedly, which is how I get a lot of my news, how I keep informed for this channel. That is pretty much identical. Let's jump into Wyze, which is, of course, my cameras and so forth and so on. Let's jump into my outside cameras. You can see they are effectively absolutely identical. Let's jump into Threads, and we'll go over to my account. Again, absolutely identical. What about YouTube, an app that I think a lot of you probably use all the time? Pixel 8a ever so slightly faster, but again, almost identical. Let's do the Play Store, a little bit faster on the 8 Pro, and then let's round things off with Pokemon Go, a game that is a little bit heavier, a little bit, graphically intensive at least. We'll turn the volume down on both of these, and we will get it fired up on both at the same time. Splash screen first on the 8A. And we're actually into the game. Very, very similar once again, although we've not loaded in all the Pokemon here on the 8A, so this may be that first example of things being a little bit slower here on the 8A, and it looks to me like maybe a little bit more hitching. There we go, we're all loaded in, so definitely a bit of a delay there. Lots of things similar, but not fully loaded in as fast on that 8A. I do want to point out that the hitching, the sort of glitchy low frame rate thing that was going on, is probably got nothing to do with these phones specifically. There's actually a setting you can change. You jump into the settings and you change it basically to use the full refresh rate of the screen. So now the game's going to run at 120 FPS to match the 120 hertz refresh rate. And when you do that, both of them run buttery smooth. It's a weird thing. I don't know if it's a Tensor specific thing, but if you don't enable that in the settings, the games are going to run and look much, much worse. Definitely, if you play Pokemon Go on Pixel, change that setting. It'll hurt your battery life, but it's almost unplayable if you don't change it. Let's dig a little bit deeper into that gaming performance, though. We have this application called 3D Mark, and I ran not just the wildlife test, but I ran the wildlife stress test. And what this is meant to do is it basically runs this 3D test, which is going to be tracking the frame rate, it's going to be tracking your temperature, so forth and so on, but it runs it over and over, and it logs how your performance has degraded. And this is where I would expect to see the differences start to pile up. If we look at the first loop, we are neck and neck. I mean, that's, 8 points off. You could say that's margin of error easily. On the next loop, same thing. We're right there within margin of error. But by the time we get to the 20th loop, We've dropped to 5,000 on the 8A, and we're still at 5697, call it 5700 on the Pixel 8 Pro. And if we look at our temperatures here, this actually almost tells like a different story, which is kind of interesting to me. So this one got up to 43 Celsius. This one got up to 45 Celsius. If we look at this graph here, you can see the temperature rising consistently as the performance was dropping. But strangely, even though the 8 Pro hit a hotter temperature, the performance stayed more stable. So this is something that potentially could be adjusted with a future update, because it seems like it is downclocking itself and lowering that performance, where on the 8 Pro, it is not really doing quite the same thing. Now, for some additional context, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to insert a snippet from my Pixel 8a review, where I do the same sort of app launching back and forth test between the 8a and the OnePlus Open. And I wanted to see if there was a significant difference between this Tensor G3 and that Snapdragon. You know what the benchmark scores will be. This thing should be faster, but I just want to kind of show you a little bit about how that doesn't really play out in the real world. More often than not, it's going to be right there with it, just as fast, if not occasionally faster than. You saw they're loading up Feedly right there with it. Again, YouTube, it's faster. And by the way, I cleared all the running apps, so all of these things are jumping in fresh, not from RAM. Let's jump into Wise. Again, the Pixel 8a on paper should be slower. In practice, that's not the case. I'll grab the Play Store. That was almost identical. Radar Omega, my favorite weather radar application, usually a little bit slow to open, and it's absolutely dominating what should be the faster device. And as you can say, this device has been set up, it's been used longer, maybe that's degraded things a little bit, but you can get my point. This phone is not slow. And as you can see, with just normal app launching, that is absolutely not going to be the case. They are almost identical with regard to that as well. So what I kind of want you guys to understand is that with normal everyday tasks, the Pixel 8a, the Tensor G3, is going to be just as fast as anything out there. However, if we get into more intense tasks, things like gaming, things like processing video, you will see a difference, not necessarily between the 8 Pro and the 8a, but between the 8a, the 8 Pro, and devices that run these newer Snapdragons. And I can kind of demonstrate that a little bit here as well. So 8a, 8 Pro, OnePlus Open, and I'm going to try to export this 10-second 4K clip simultaneously on all three of them. I don't think this is going to be super easy. We're cranking up the settings on everything though. I'm trying to do my best, and we'll see how close they get. Not quite perfect, but it's going to be close enough to be able to tell the Open was way faster than the 8a, then the 8 Pro. That is a little bit strange. So let's go back and let's do these two again simultaneously. Maybe that was just my margin of error. That appears to kind of be the case, but not totally, because the 8a still was faster. Let's do these two again side by side, just again to make sure my margin of error wasn't making a big impact. You can see the OnePlus Open is running away with things when it comes to exporting 4K video, and that's what I would expect to see in general. So hopefully that is some interesting and potentially useful data for you going forward. When it comes to regular everyday tasks, the Pixel 8a is going to be virtually just as fast as the Pixel 8 Pro, despite the difference in the packaging. When it comes to long-term gaming for long sessions, it may start to degrade a little bit faster. That is something that could be addressed with a future software update, as we saw, basing that assumption on the temperatures. But when it comes to things like video processing, they're both going to fall behind something like the Snapdragon 8 Gen 3. Gaming is going to be the same story. Neither one of them are going to be quite as fast at either one of those tasks. So guys, thanks for watching. Subscribe for more content just like this, and until next time, stay nerdy, my friends.